In 1989, the Detroit Lions had a third overall pick in that year's draft. They would use that pick to select a running back out of Oklahoma State. His name was Sanders, Barry Sanders, and he was arguably the best running back of all time in college, and that title didn't go anywhere in the NFL. In just his third year, he would lead the Lions to a 12-4 season, where they would win the division and secure a spot in the playoffs. The team they would be facing would be the Dallas Cowboys, and the Lions would completely tear them apart.
Sanders still on his feet, and Sanders is gone.
Winning 38-6 and finally ending their 33-year playoff win drought. But unfortunately, they would get blown out by the Redskins in the NFC Championship. And just like that, as soon as one playoff win drought ended, another one began. Even with arguably the best NFL running back of all time on the team, they wouldn't win a single playoff game. Barry Sanders was sick of this team, and he was tired of losing. He retired after the 1998 season. Shortly after his departure, the team would return to being one of the worst in the NFL. By 2008, the Lions had completed the first 16-loss season in NFL history. They didn't win a single game that year. It was probably the lowest and darkest moment in Lions franchise history. However, in 2009, the Lions would bring together Calvin Johnson, also known as Megatron, one of the greatest receivers of all time, and pair him up with quarterback Matthew Stafford. And those two would become one of the most unstoppable quarterback-receiver duos ever. But even they weren't enough to win the Lions a playoff game. And the Lions' playoff win drought continued, and that cloud that loomed over Detroit looked like it was going nowhere. Well, at least until the 2021 offseason, when the Lions made a controversial move and hired a quote-unquote meathead as their head coach. A head coach that would change their franchise forever. The 2021 offseason was undoubtedly a massive offseason for the Lions franchise. But let's take a step back. Prior to the 2020 season, Martha Firestone Ford would step down as the owner of the Lions and would pass the team on to her daughter. Now as the new owner, Sheila Ford wanted change. She was tired of the Lions being the bottom feeders of the NFL. So in just her first year as the owner, she did something that hadn't been done in over 15 years. She fired their head coach Matt Patricia and general manager Bob Quinn mid-season. Now this takes us to 2021, an offseason that would change this franchise forever. The first thing Sheila Ford did was find a competent general manager, and well, she found one, but not where you'd expect. Brad Holmes was the director of college scouting for the Rams. He played a crucial part in drafting players like Todd Gurley, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and Jared Goff. Following the 2020 season, Sheila took a gamble and offered Holmes a significantly higher position that he had never been in before. She wanted him to be the general manager of the Lions. Next up was the head coach. Sheila Ford took another gamble and hired Dan Campbell as the head coach of the Detroit Lions. This decision was very controversial. Dan Campbell was a tight ends coach and assistant head coach behind Sean Payton with the Saints, so obviously he had a good mentor. But he also had little to no experience as a head coach either. However, he was really great at one thing, being a leader. He was a coach that guys wanted to play for, a coach that could get 100% out of his players. But there was one more thing about Dan that really tied everything together. Back in 2008, Dan Campbell played in the NFL as a tight end. He was a part of the Detroit Lions when they were at probably the lowest point in their entire franchise's history.
And the O in Motown officially stands for 0-16.
It was embarrassing to call yourself a Lions fan, let alone a player in that infamous and dark season. In his introductory speech, he made it clear this was not going to be the same old Lions.
All right, and so this team's going to be built on, we're going to kick you in the teeth, all right? And when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up. And then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
The front office and the coaching staff was set. Now the only thing missing were the players. In a bold first move, Brad Holmes would trade away the Lions franchise quarterback, Matthew Stafford, in exchange for Rams quarterback Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks, and a 3rd-round pick. It was a fair trade. The Rams got their quarterback to turn them into Super Bowl contenders, and the Lions got a massive haul of resources to start the rebuild. The Lions had a really weak team, but there was one part of the team that had a strong foundation: the O-line. They already had Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, and Jonah Jackson, and in the 2021 draft, they would make the O-line even better. With the 7th overall pick, the Detroit Lions selected their best O-lineman and offensive tackle Penei Sewell. They also drafted defensive tackle Lee McNeil and cornerback Ifeatu in the 3rd round, and wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th. They would also sign linebacker Alex Anzalone in free agency. 5 players that would end up being key for this team. Now with a strong foundation set, they headed into the 2021 season, but they would start the season losing again and again. And they would win not a single game until week 13.
I wouldn't want Goff sitting in there comfortable. There's Hawkinson inside.
Here we go. Goff from the gun to the end zone. It is caught. Touchdown.
After overcoming the Vikings with a last-second game winner, the Lions had achieved their first victory of the season. They would win 2 of their last 5 games and would finish 3-13-1. By all means a bad season, but it was expected. This was the first year of a rebuild, and even though they didn't find much success, this season was a massive stepping stone. The first thing the Lions did in the offseason was fire offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn and promote Ben Johnson from tight ends coach to the new offensive coordinator. And in the 2022 draft, the Lions would hit yet again.
With the 2nd pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Aiden Hutchinson, defensive end, Michigan. Jamison Williams, wide receiver, Alabama.
Kirby Joseph, defensive back, Illinois.
The 2022 season again started off rough. The Lions would lose 6 of their first 7 games, and honestly, on the surface, it looked like they were the same old Lions. Even though the record made it seem like they were really bad, they really weren't. And Dan Campbell knew this. He believed in his team. He knew this team and the talent they had was better than a 1-6 record. But I'd be remiss to not mention that after starting the season poorly again, many questioned and doubted whether Dan Campbell was the answer as the Lions head coach. He was labeled a meathead, and many said he was very brash and that he was too emotional. And on top of that, he also had a vastly different and, quite frankly, looked down upon approach in his offense's philosophy. Dan Campbell lived and died by the 4th down. I mean, they broke the record for most 4th down attempts in NFL history in just his first year there. It was obvious Dan believed in his offense, but even so, up to this point in his time with the Lions, he had won just 4 games and lost 19. It wasn't looking too good for Dan Campbell. But then, it all clicked. After week 8, the Lions would completely turn the ship around and win 8 of the 10 remaining games, ending with a record of 9-8. They did barely miss the playoffs, but that didn't matter. This team was looking genuinely good for the first time in years, and they ended the season with a lot of momentum. Which brings us to 2023, a special season for the Lions franchise. The Lions already had good talent on this team, but they would have yet again another incredible offseason. An offseason that will turn them from an average football team to Super Bowl contenders. In free agency, they picked up running back David Montgomery. However, the draft would be where they would strike gold and find 4 crucial players that would make an immediate impact.
12th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Jahmyr Gibbs, running back, Alabama.
All right.
Jack Campbell, linebacker, Iowa. Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa. Brian Branch, defensive back, Alabama.
All right.
This team was good going into 2023, and expectations were extremely high. But there was still a cloud looming over Detroit. That 32-year playoff win drought was still there. The first opponent on the Lions' schedule would be the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions. They were the best team in the NFL, but the Lions wanted to make a statement.
On 4th and 25, and Mahomes looking to make a play, flings it across his body, and it is incomplete. 3rd and 2. Montgomery shifting forward, has the first down at the 20-yard line. Kansas City takes its final timeout. They come in to Kansas City on opening night and beat the champs.
And just like that, you already knew this year was going to be special. The Lions would end the season 12-5 and would clinch the playoffs as a 3rd seed. Their opponent in the wild card would be Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. But it wasn't going to be easy. With 4 minutes left in the game, the Rams had the ball and were trailing 23-24 at the Lions' 44-yard line. It was 3rd and 14, but even just a 10-yard completion would put them in field goal range. But instead, this happened.
3rd and 14. Stafford steps up, throws inside. Nakua incomplete with a ton of contact. No call and 4th down.
The Lions offense took over the ball and never looked back.
And Detroit, for the first time in 32 years, your Lions have won a playoff game. Have at it.
And they would keep that momentum in the divisional round.
Pressure that may come. Here comes that pressure. Mayfield in the middle, intercepted! It's Derek Barnes! It's off to San Francisco!
They would overcome the Buccaneers 31-23. Now, they would make it to the AFC Championship, where they would face off against the 49ers, 1 game away from making their first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. In 1992, the Lions were in the exact same spot. However, that year they had to face the best team in the NFL, the Washington Redskins, and they never even stood a chance. The Detroit Lions would get blown out 41-10. Now 32 long years later, they were finally back, but this time, they weren't gonna roll over as easily. The Lions began the game dominating the 49ers, scoring points on all but 1 drive in the first half. The Lions were blowing out the 49ers 24-7, and in the second half it was looking the same until Dan Campbell decided to call a risky 4th and 2 attempt, and it was the right call, but
Off to throw. Here comes pressure. Escapes. Fires over the middle, and it is incomplete.
this turnover on downs set up the 49ers to find the end zone. The Lions got the ball back at their 25-yard line, but in just their first play, they fumbled.
Ball is loose. 49ers recover.
The 49ers found the end zone again. It was all tied up 24-24. After the Lions punted away, the 49ers scored a field goal, and the Lions got the ball back with 10 minutes left in the game. This was a crucial drive. The Lions drove down the field, but they found themselves on another 4th and short. They could take the field goal and tie up the game, or they could go for it and try to continue the drive. To no one's surprise, Dan Campbell went for it.
Pressure. In trouble. Throws on the run. Incomplete. And the gamble on 4th down does not pay off.
But they failed to convert and would turn the ball over, scoring no points in the process. And with only 3 minutes left in the game, the 49ers scored another touchdown, making it now 34-24 and officially putting the game out of the Lions' reach. The 49ers completed a 17-point comeback and ended the Lions' magical playoff run. The Lions went for it on 4th down 45 times in their 2023 campaign, and for the most part it was always in their favor. Their hyper-aggressive playstyle was what made them one of the best offenses in the NFL. However, the 4th down just wasn't on their side in the NFC Championship. The Lions lived and died by the 4th down.
I don't regret those decisions, and that's hard. You know, it's hard because, we didn't come through. It wasn't able to work out, but I don't. And I understand the scrutiny I'll get. That's part of the gig, man. But, we just didn't work out.
Most people would dial it back, take their foot off the gas pedal. Simply put, they would change the way they call their games. The 4th down was just too much of a gamble. It was too risky. Coming off a heartbreaking loss in 2023, instead of playing more conservative, instead of playing it more safe, the Detroit Lions only got more aggressive and bolder in 2024.
Cardinals trailing here as Goff hits St. Brown, who flips it to Jahmyr Gibbs. And Gibbs is in the end zone for a Lions touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to throw it back to Goff, who had that on the bingo card.
Both sides, 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties.
Now Gibbs stumbled after taking the snap, but it doesn't matter. Connects with Laporta for a Lions touchdown.
The Lions are the first seed in the NFC with a record of 15-2, the most wins in franchise history. They're dominating the NFL with their aggressive and creative style of football, and they're having fun in the process. And it's honestly looking like this might be their year. Dan Campbell has completely changed the culture of a franchise that was so used to losing, a franchise that were the bottom feeders of the NFL for so long, and turned them into winners. Brad Holmes and the front office have constructed a football roster filled with talent in just 3 years. And for the Lions fan base, well, after enduring mediocrity and disappointment for so long, they're now enjoying watching their team take over the NFL. Whatever the outcome may be this postseason, you can be confident that with Sheila Ford, Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell leading this team, the Detroit Lions aren't going anywhere anytime soon.